welcome to the garden again. It is the 18th of August. Hang on, let me look. So I was just going off for about, 15 minutes and then realized it wasn't recording. So, oh well. It just rained and things are looking awesome. We got weeds. We got human food plants, all kind of doing their own thing. Here's a sun gold tomato plant. There's lots of tomatoes on that. Sweet potato, looking pretty good. A few nibbles there, here and there on the leaves. This is my C. maxima Grex. This is the short season version of it, so kind of just seeing what's going to happen with this. But I see plenty of female flowers, and so we're going to get at least a few. I might have to pinch off a few if it keeps putting out mini, right, kabocha that may or may not make it. That's a decision I'm going to take. So, just so it puts energy into what's viable as opposed to what's not. There's another one there happening. This is just one that has been historically hard for me to grow, or that I only tried growing in the spring. I think the strategy may be avoid the squash borer or whatever it is that's getting to my maximas in the spring. And just planting them, I just planted these around July. It's August 21st today. So things are looking cool. Here's some sweet corn. Teosinte. Still not flowering because it's photo period. So that's a good way of sort of eliminating any kinds of pollen issues. But yeah, it just rained, so this is normally everything doesn't look this kind of happy. I don't want to be sort of false advertising about how this works. But yeah, the leaves are really, reaching high. Everything looks very healthy right now. Good color on the leaves, I would say. So the nutrients are getting to these plants somehow. I'm sort of testing theory of whether you really need to be as local in your fertilization as you need to be, or whether you can just kind of get the general area, and that whatever gets nutrients to plants is taking care of the sort of logistics of getting it there. This is something that Fukuoka has alluded to a couple times in his literature, as far as I've been able to see. And I don't know, it seems to be checking out. Yeah. Just kind of, you can fertilize in sort of a few spots. You can divide your garden up into X number of, mini spots. Another idea, this is what I was thinking, is that there's, in theory you could get, if it doesn't matter where you're putting the fertility so much, you could just have like a bunch of buckets placed evenly in your garden that are constantly leaking out fertilizer. The most minimal way of doing that is just leaving a bucket with some sort of, well, I could show you. Like this, basically. And this could be sort of just an autonomous fertilization region. You could make it part of your habit to just kind of come by every day and step on it, push things down a little. And then, some fertilizer is going to come out. You can add some to the top. But yeah, you could get a pretty elegant system going that way. Stuff is also just going to come off the top. If, you know, you have this and then you are, water's coming in, obviously, and then it's just going to leak out the sides. Although you're going to get sort of a diluted version. Maybe it's at the right dilution for your soil. And yeah, if you had some sort of wire mesh or something like this, this is what I use for seed saving. I got it online. I think they sell it to be used for like sifting for gold. So it's just a bunch of these, and there's varying levels of fineness of the mesh. Anyway, but this is cool because it just goes. It also happens to fit on top of the bucket, both this way and the other way, this way. So I think it's intended to go the other way, but I'm using it like this to keep bugs out. And yeah, so you could just do, like, you know, however big your garden is, you could just do 10 or a 10 of those or whatever. But yeah, I'll kind of check back here, see if it sort of feels like it's becoming a high fertility area. But yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with the color of the leaves and everything. This, you know, they look like healthy plants to me. I see pretty much no droopage on, I would say, about this half of the garden. So this is, again, where I don't get as much light. So in my kind of shadier area, it is a little limited. But that means that there's more water available at the end of the day too. Whereas on this half of the garden, you know, it's getting closer to full sun. You can see this, right? Shade in one part. And now, you know, the most light dense area of my garden is just everything along the fence here. But that, I don't know, it doesn't seem to matter as much as people say. You know, the difference between 8 hours and 7 hours. I don't know. I'm not super, you know, concerned with yield personally. The difference between a lot, you know, and a ton, I find that, you know, I tend to have more than I need already. And so, yeah, you know, the light thing to me is not a huge deal, but I haven't really run the numbers about what gets what. But you know, I can say that when it comes to what I once treated as sort of marginal area, when I first set up this garden, it was basically, you know, this line here was what I considered marginal land, and only started using, you know, I would grow moshada out of the corners and stuff like that. And I started to notice that you know, they did fine. There was not still, you know, I was getting what seemed like really good yields for not full sun. Some melon. This is the melon Grex. Here's one. And there's, yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest one right now. Lots of little smaller dudes that are starting to emerge. And yeah, it's also just, you know, crawling around, which is good. That seems to be what the plants sort of want to do. So yeah, I'm learning a lot this year about how to kind of better, you know, gently guide these plants in various directions, you know, that you are trying to be, you know, just this force that comes in every so often and, you know, just redirects one thing or the other in a way that you want. I don't know what I'm going to do here, but I'm sure I'll need some space to clear and plant something, a sort of, you know, a fall garden type crop in the next couple days or so. Anyway, okra, yeah, coming in just fine now. Getting good crops of okra every day. That's when you really gotta tend to it every day. Same with if you're growing zucchini or something like it. It's like if you don't, you think, oh, I'll get this tomorrow, and then tomorrow comes and it's like too big already. So it's a good problem to have. Yeah, so this is kind of a vining peppo with what looks like a crookneck. Oh, cool. Oh, wow. This, I think, is a grow out of a patty pan, right? But you can see it's not a patty pan anymore. This is what I just replanted some F2. So saved seed from a hybrid, and so that's starting to show some cool weirdness, right? So if you know what patty pan looks like, right? It's not that, but it does have. I'm guessing that's what this is because the yellow on top and green on the bottom seems to be similar to that. So that's cool. Didn't really know. Are these separate plants? I think these must be two different plants. Anyway, yeah. So that's cool. I'll take it. Patty pan though, that's a good one. Good consistency. If you don't like the consistency of squash, right? You think it's too soft or watery, try growing some patty pans and really, make sure you get them when they're young. When they're maybe about, that big. And yeah, they are firm and delicious. Okay, so this is an area that normally droops, but that isn't because it rained today. And yeah, now it's not drooping. I guess with a lot of these cucurbitas, it seems, like if they're not pulling a ton of water, that they seem to suffer during the day. But I'm here to tell you that there's a certain amount. Don't be like, I gotta water. When you see drooping on the leaves of these, because they do make it. Just observe like that, the next evening, even just when the lights go out in your garden, when it starts to get darker out, you'll see that the leaves pop back up. And so if that's happening, it's not really water that's the problem. Or, I mean, it is, but it will survive without supplement or water, is my experience. So you can rest a little easy if you see the leaves and they're not popping up. But it's interesting, to see, because in some places, once like a peppo, for example, gets established, it's fine. It doesn't seem to need water, and the leaves don't really droop. And you're like, what kind of deal has this plant made? And it tends to be the case that the ones that are planted in the ones that are as close to a volunteer as possible tend to be the toughest when it comes to connecting with water, with figuring out how to get water out of the soil, or just rooting better somehow. But yeah, man, look at the size of these leaves. Right here, right? It just looks like a little bomb has been dropped in nature, right? When it's like, whoosh. All right, this area is mine now. So yeah, if you can get things like these growing, you can really kind of, establish dominance among the weeds. And this plant right here, for example, struggled for a really long time You know, it started out like one of these, you know, which don't look very good at all. These are some kind of, I don't know if I planted something or if it's an accident there. And that's okay, I mean, because by accident I mean just, you know, something I do, you know, take a lot of just gambles with throwing seed out wherever, because it's like, you know, sometimes it will work and that's all you need. Sometimes it's often enough, especially if you just up the number of chances that you're taking, up the number of gambles that you're making when you throw seed around. This is my theory or idea, and as you can see, it seems to work out. Something I think about a lot. I don't know how much it matters, but you know, do you step on soil certain places or do you not? I think we're always sort of told don't. But it might not matter as much as we think. I think that you can have good absorbent soil that is still going to be solid to walk on. Especially if you just, you know, like dig up a chunk of your soil where, you know you've given it good fertilization, you know it's fertile. You will see that, I mean, although it's, you know, a consistent clump, it is going to be there's a lot of little holes from worms and stuff like that. There's a video where I think in one of my past videos I show a dried up clump of what was once good soil, and there's all kinds of tunnels. So yeah, I think there's just has to be a certain number of paths, you know, it doesn't have to all be perfect friable soil. But I guess at the end of the day, the way that we could test this is to just, when you're throwing out seed, also throw out seed where you walk and see, well, you know, stuff will pop up, and then the question then becomes, does it reach maturity? Right? Will it survive while being trodden upon, as they say in Spinal Tap? You ever see that movie? Anyway, trodden upon. But that if you step on, yeah, some plants can survive a stepping on, some definitely can't. And so, you know, you need your paths, you need your walkways, and generally I would say stick to those. But right, if you're, you know, out doing something and you need to cross over into another spot or something, I don't think it matters as much as people say. But yeah, this is, I guess, a testable hypothesis. So, something to think about going forward. Anyway, my sort of way of doing things is to just kind of improvise paths by walking on certain areas and not walking on certain areas, and that's basically it. You know, a path is a thing that sort of tends to happen organically. Here's a path. But that, yeah, I mean, you don't want to be compacting the soil too much. You know that that's not good. But it's also, you know, interesting to see what happens in areas where you are walking all the time versus areas where you're not. And I don't need to really say much more about it other than just try it and you'll see what I mean. Okay. So yeah, this is what things look like when there's an abundance of water. I'll do a comparison video probably by tomorrow. A lot of stuff will be drooping, but it's really interesting to see what does and doesn't droop, and it gives me a lot of ideas. It's also interesting to see what I can get away with. August 23rd, out here in the garden. It's just maybe a little after noon, so this is when most of my garden is getting full sun, and some stuff kind of droops. I was talking about this earlier. And I wanted to give you a more kind of realistic version of what the garden tends to look like in the middle of the day if the sun's out. So yeah, I mean, you see quite a bit of droop on the leaves of these cucurbitas, although not all of them. So, you know, a little curious as to why some do and some don't. But I think the general trend is that, you know, where they're planted, the soil is holding more water. And let me show you where it's especially bad. This is my Maxima Grex. And, but yeah, you can see over here, just a couple feet away, we have stuff that's not drooping at all in full sun, middle of the day, heat. So yeah, just something to think about. Here's another example over here. This is Tits Kabuto, you know, it's got a little bit of droop, quite a bit of droop over there. And then over here, I don't know why, but everything growing out of this patch of asparagus is just always pretty much standing at attention. You see a little bit of droop here and there, but nice big green leaves and looking healthy. But yeah, strange to see why some droop and some don't. Here you'll see, right, not too much droop on this. Again, this is something kind of hanging out in the corner. Cucumbers, plenty of droop there. But it doesn't seem to be suffering as much as over there. So let's go take a look at that. So even, you know, really tough standbys like Jerusalem artichoke there, you see that's drooping a little bit as well. Yeah, cucumbers here. Again, there's some kind of dry ground that's exposed, so that's probably where I'm losing a lot of water. But yeah, plenty of droop here, and I may give it a little supplemental water later today. No droop on the melon, Korean melon Grex. Chamoy seems to be doing weirdly well. So that's certainly interesting. Drooping here. Not so much drooping over here, but this is, I mean, this is low light. This is going to be, like I said, it's around noon, but by 2 or so, this is going to be shaded. So we'll see what's going to happen. A little bit of droop there, you know, but I guess what I'm trying to say is don't worry too much about it. Some stuff will droop during the day and then pop back up. Not necessarily your cue to step in and water every time. Notice this cucumber. Picked up a few squash. So I would say, you know, things are going to droop. Let that sort of be an indicator of your, you know, your soil conditions. The fact that some plants don't droop, you know, should give you hope for where you can get your soil moisture levels. You can get it up, right? You can improve the situation. Seems to be working some places. I would say one of the biggest things you can do is just sort of imagine, you know, your soil to be a sponge, and that, you know, if you said this is a sponge though that gets set out in the sun, right? And so it's going to dry out, right? If it's porous, you want it to be porous, right, so that it can absorb water. But so if you see, you know, bare soil, something like this, that's right, it might be a hint that that should be covered up. I guess my theory is that, you know, any sort of bare soil area is going to just act as water is going to just evaporate from there quickly, and it's going to pull other water out with it from the edges. So you want to keep things covered, either with you know, roots in the ground from plants causing shade to happen, or some sort of organic material that you have, right? And if you look around, there's all sorts of stuff you can chop down and use. Me, I just happen to be using grass because I live in a culture where you're supposed to mow your lawn. My neighbors would get mad if I didn't. And if you're gonna have to mow, you might as well collect a little biomass while you're at it. So that's what I'm doing, and it seems to work as a way of keeping soil moisture kind of locked in, and sort of keeping weeds out too. I wouldn't say that's really its primary function. You can see that, you know, you have to put down quite a bit of grass to get weed elimination, but you can get away with significantly less grass and some weed elimination by just taking the slow route. But I think that the amount of shade that you're getting on the soil is what's ultimately important. Whether you eliminate weeds or not is up to you. As you can see, I'm not really winning the battle against weeds so much here, but I think that by having all this down, I do have a significantly more watery soil, wet soil. Okay, so anyway, yeah, this is what things look like during the day. And you'll notice, right, if, you know, a cloud comes over, that, you know, pretty quickly a lot of leaves will perk up. So leaves like that, you don't want to consider that to be any sort of serious, you know, watering issue. Don't rush to water stuff if you don't need to. And, you know, consider watering to be one of these things that you might do occasionally, similar to weeding, but that your end goal is to not make this part of the process, to eliminate watering as part of the process, in the same way that eliminating weeding can be part of the process, right? But that you don't accept this as something that you'll have to do all the time going forward, right? Next year, you can do a little less watering. The year after that, a little less watering. And the same with weeding, right? This year, some weeding, all right? Next year, a little less weeding. But don't accept this as part of your sort of cultural goals, right, going forward. Don't accept that, yeah, weeding is going to be something that you're going to have to do year after year if you're in this for the long haul, right, to see how things get better year after year. That's just my opinion on that, and I think it seems to be a good way to move forward. To summarize what I was trying to say earlier, I would say, you know, ask yourself what sorts of conditions you do and don't accept as part of how you want to work, right? Are there things that you wish you could do less of? Well then, admit that to yourself, right? And then think seriously about how you can do less of that, right? And the answer is going to be, right, some kind of little hack or interesting thing that you discover. A window of time in which you can do something and things will go your way. And I think if you do that, right, that you can year after year accomplish better things. And share these things with your neighbors, right? People growing in similar conditions. It should be the MTV Cribs of gardening. When you have a friend over who's like-minded, who's also growing food, interested in this sort of stuff. We want to be showing off what we're capable of getting away with, and we should be sharing tricks with each other, because when one person learns these tricks, right, this is something that can really be shared with other people easily, right? This is a technology, right, that you are working with, and in particular when it comes to similar soil and similar growing conditions, right? You're going to have neighbors who can benefit from the genetics that you have, your locally cultivated land-raised seed, and things can really move forward. You can move towards sort of this idea of terroir, or that there's a certain version of X, Y, or Z plant, certain version of a melon, right, that only you can grow in your climate, right, or maybe even in just your garden, and so that's a cultural heritage, and that's a piece of wealth, and that's value that transcends any sort of monetary system. That's human to human value that is not subject to inflation, that's not subject to the fact that money is technically fake, right? And so that's the sort of culture that we want to, I think, try and build through, regreening Earth, and through having, great food in the process. So thanks for working along with me.